Report now! Captain Nix Valen's voice cut through the chaos of the bridge like a sharp blade, his words bouncing off the hardened steel walls of the Sovereign's wrath. The ship groaned as it slid silently through the void, the engine's rumble barely audible to those on board. Despite the quiet hum of the systems in the background, an unspoken tension crawled through the crew, an invisible current running just beneath the surface. They knew something was coming. The laser plasma displays flickered with urgency, casting eerie green glows across the faces of the crew, each one pale from the stress. A blip appeared on the sensor grid, small, unfamiliar, yet increasingly dangerous. Valen's jaw tightened, and his hands moved quickly over the heads-up displays in front of him, his fingers dancing with the practiced ease of a seasoned commander. This was not the first time he had faced an unknown threat, but this was different. This was humanity's return to a galaxy that had long believed them gone. "Incoming ship, Captain," reported Lieutenant Kane Varon, his voice steady, though the subtle tremor in his grip betrayed his anxiety. "It's approaching from the outer rim of the system. No IFF signals, no transmission, just cold, dead space." Valen's eyes narrowed as he studied the flickering data in front of him. His gaze sharpened, cutting through the uncertainty, and his voice dropped to a low growl. "Prepare for all contingencies, and get me a clear scan of that vessel, now." The tension on the bridge thickened. Crew members rushed from station to station, their movements efficient, but with an edge of urgency that came from the unknown. Every eye was glued to their stations, some trying to decipher the digital code flashing in front of them, others leaning in, waiting for answers. The deep, low hum of the Sovereign's wrath was a constant companion, but even that sound seemed distant now, like the thrum of a heart that was too slow to beat in the thickened air. "I've got it," muttered Sergeant Rukon Theron, the ship's sensor specialist, his large hands dancing over the console with unshaken focus. "It's not transmitting any signals, sir. No weapons fired, no drive signatures. It's like it materialized right out of thin space. Just nothing." Valen stood tall at the center of the room, his eyes flicking from the data pad to the laser plasma displays. His crew was skilled, loyal, but something about the way this ship had appeared so suddenly unsettled him. He had seen human ships disappear into the void before, their quantum drives leaving behind only fleeting echoes in the dark. But this wasn't that. This wasn't a simple jump into hyperspace. This was something else, something far more deliberate. "Could be a rogue ship," Valen said, though the words felt hollow, as if he was speaking more to himself than to his crew. "Someone trying to bypass the trade routes again. It wouldn't be the first time." He clicked his tongue, and his mandibles clicked in thought. But there was no certainty. He knew what it could mean, yet didn't want to say it. Earth had vanished from the stars for over a decade. It had been a graveyard of memories and scorched worlds. The Council, with its monopoly over intergalactic peace, had quashed every attempt to revive what was left of human civilization, and the galaxy had moved on, pretending the human race was just another casualty of history. "Wait," Valen muttered, focusing on the incoming ship's trajectory. "I've seen that hull design before. It's human." His voice was low, barely a whisper against the backdrop of his thoughts. The flickering display seemed to pulse, casting sharp shadows against the dark metal of the ship's interior. A heavy silence fell over the crew as realization struck them all at once. The humans weren't gone. They were coming back. "Get me Commander Malik," Valen ordered, his tone sharp, dangerous. "Now!" As he waited for the connection to be established, Valen's mind raced back through the years of Earth's fall, the heat of the last battle, the screams of those left behind. He had led the remnants of humanity into the depths of space. But now, the past was rising to meet them, wrapped in the iron grasp of a forgotten warship. His thoughts were interrupted as the heads-up display blinked to life, the cold voice of the communication officer breaking through the tension. "Commander Malik is online, sir." "Put him through," Valen replied, his gaze never leaving the plasma display in front of him. The hologram flickered, revealing the sharp features of First Commander Ishar Malik, a seasoned officer of the Galactic Council's defense fleet. His face was stern, his expression unreadable. The long years spent enforcing the Council's rule had etched a harshness in his features. "Human vessel," Malik began, his voice clipped and controlled. "You have entered restricted space. This is First Commander Malik of the Galactic Council's Defense Station, 7. State your intentions or prepare to be engaged." Valen didn't flinch. His eyes remained locked on the screen, but the weight of his next words felt like the weight of all the galaxy's judgments. "I am Captain Nix Valen, Commander of the Sovereign's Wrath, representing the remnants of Earth. You've been warned. Stand down, or your next mistake will be your last." The words hung in the air like a challenge, the promise of war. Malik's eyes flickered with something akin to disbelief, though he quickly masked it behind his military composure. "I've heard the rumors," Malik replied, his voice quiet but filled with authority. "I thought them to be nothing more than stories. Yet here you are." Valen's expression hardened as he straightened, preparing himself for what was to come. "Stories don't fight. We do." The connection cut abruptly as the visual feed disappeared. A single, loud beep echoed in the silence, followed by the quiet static of communication being severed. "Prepare for battle stations," Valen ordered, his voice steady, but with an undercurrent of something more, something primal. His crew sprang into action, swiftly moving to their designated stations. The Sovereign's Wrath was designed for this very moment, built to survive, to fight, and if necessary, to strike with the cold precision of humanity's rage. As the crew worked in synchronized chaos, Valen's eyes turned once more to the laser plasma displays. The ship was still approaching, its trajectory unwavering, and he knew that what came next would define the fate of humanity's place in this galaxy. For too long, the Council had kept their secrets hidden. But now, the truth was coming for them, and it would not be silenced. The Sovereign's Wrath was humanity's last chance, the ship that would break the silence of the void and make the stars remember who they had cast aside. "Let's make them remember." Valen's voice was a low growl as he turned to face his crew. His command was simple, but in that moment, it was everything. "We move now." The hum of the ship's systems intensified, now a constant vibration in the bones of every crew member aboard. The Sovereign's Wrath surged forward into the darkness, and the cold, empty silence of space swallowed the sound of its engines as it closed in on the Council's fortress, preparing for the storm to come. The moment the communication cut off, the Sovereign's Wrath surged into the abyss, its sensors now alive with data, every piece of information feeling like a drop in a torrent that threatened to swallow them whole. Captain Nix Valen stood still, his gaze fixed ahead. The ship's powerful engines thrummed with the urgency of their mission, but in that instant, the noise seemed far away, as if the universe itself had decided to hold its breath. Approaching the outer rim of Verde Prime's orbit, Kane Varen's voice broke through the silence, calm but clipped. "We've got company. Council ships are deploying. They've locked onto us, Captain." Valen's eyes didn't leave the darkened expanse outside. The blackness beyond the reinforced glass of the bridge seemed to press against them, as if space itself was trying to suffocate the very hope they had fought so hard to reclaim. "How long until engagement?" Valen's voice remained steady, but his knuckles whitened as he gripped the console before him. His mind was already calculating their options, reading the movements of the enemy like an old friend. This was not their first fight. 20 minutes at most," Varen replied, his fingers dancing across the plasma console. "They're taking a slow, calculated approach. Perhaps too calculated." "Too calculated?" Valen's brow furrowed, the hint of suspicion creeping into his voice. "What do you mean?" "Their formation, Captain," Varen explained, not looking up from his work. "They're not rushing in. They're circling, almost as if they want us to make the first move." A tense silence fell over the bridge, broken only by the soft hiss of air from the ventilation system. Every crew member felt it, the calm before the storm. The Council wasn't making a mistake. They were setting a trap, waiting for them to reveal their intentions. Valen's gaze flicked to Sergeant Rukon Theron, who was monitoring the communication channels. The large alien had been quiet since the initial transmission, his mandibles twitching in thought. "They're trying to force our hand," Rukon murmured, his deep voice carrying a weight that spoke of years spent hunting the enemy, anticipating their every move. "If they know we're here, they've already started calculating how we'll respond. They're looking for a weakness. They won't fire first unless we give them no choice." Valen nodded slowly. "Then we'll make sure they don't get that choice." His fingers slid over the controls with ease, his mind working in tandem with the ship's systems. It wasn't just about evasion, it was about planting doubt in the enemy's minds, about making them question everything they thought they knew. The Sovereign's wrath wasn't the only weapon in the fight. It was the ship's mind, its tactics, its ability to turn the Council's own arrogance against them. "Status report on the drones," Valen asked, his voice a low command. Lieutenant Kane Varen's hands didn't falter as he pulled up the display, his eyes flickering over the incoming data. "Drones are primed and ready, Captain. They're set to defend and disable but not destroy unless absolutely necessary." "Good. Keep them on standby. We'll need them soon," Valen replied, turning his attention back to the screen. He could feel the tension thickening, like the taut string of a bow ready to snap. The drone network was their last line of defense, but Valen knew it wasn't just about weaponry. It was about perception. The Council needed to think that they were outmatched, outclassed. Only then would they hesitate. His mind was still racing, calculating the exact position of each enemy vessel as it neared. These were not just ships. They were extensions of the Council's will. And if there was one thing Valen knew, it was that the Council would do whatever it took to maintain its grip on the galaxy. "Incoming transmission, Captain," Rukon called out, his tone low but urgent. "It's from Commander Malik." Valen's eyes narrowed, his hand hovering over the console. "Patch it through." The plasma display flickered to life once again, this time showing the stern face of First Commander Escher Malik. His dark eyes bore into Valen through the screen, calculating, as if everything around him was part of a much larger equation that only he understood. "You've made a mistake, human." Malik's voice was measured, yet there was a thread of menace woven through it. "This is your last warning. Stand down, or we will be forced to take action." Valen didn't flinch. His jaw tightened, and he leaned in slightly, his voice low and deliberate. "You've been warned, Commander Malik. This is not a war you want to start." Malik's eyes flickered, a brief spark of something, maybe recognition, maybe doubt, before it was gone. "You don't know what you're dealing with. We've fought wars longer than your species has existed, Valen. You're nothing but a pawn in a game you don't understand." Valen's gaze never wavered. He didn't need to prove himself. The Sovereign's wrath was proof enough. "You don't get to decide what we are anymore." Valen's voice cut through the air, colder now. "We're not your pawns, Malik. We're humanity." Before Malik could respond, the transmission flickered and cut off. Valen stood tall, turning to face his crew. "They'll move in soon. We need to be ready. All stations, prepare for engagement." The bridge buzzed with activity as the crew went to work, their movements sharp and precise. The display screens hummed with data, the faintest whisper of the ship's systems coming to life as they prepared for battle. Yet, amidst the frenzy, Valen stood still, his mind locked in a single, unwavering thought. It wasn't just about survival. It was about exposing the truth. And they would do whatever it took to see that truth spread across the stars. "Lieutenant Varen," Valen called, his eyes focused on the heads-up display. "Set course for their defensive perimeter. We'll lure them in. Let them believe they have the upper hand." Varen's fingers were already moving, programming the coordinates into the system. "Aye, Captain." The ship shifted slightly, its course taking them toward the Council's defensive line. The tension on the bridge was thick, but Valen remained calm. They were outnumbered. They were outgunned. But the Sovereign's wrath wasn't here to fight the Council's war. They were here to start a new one built on truth, not lies. He looked around at his crew, each one of them steady in their resolve. They were ready. But more than that, they were eager. The galaxy had forgotten humanity, and now humanity was ready to remind them. "Let's show them what happens when you push too far," Valen muttered under his breath, his gaze once again fixed on the incoming enemy fleet. They were approaching, slowly, methodically, just as Valen had anticipated. This was their moment. The Sovereign's wrath cut through the shadows of space with a purpose, its hull a dark silhouette against the star-speckled void. The approaching council ships loomed like predators in the distance, their outlines emerging from the dark like towering specters. Valen stood at the helm, his eyes narrowed as the displays flickered with data, the laser plasma displays casting sharp green light across the faces of his crew. The tension was unbearable, thick like the air of a room left sealed for too long. Every second stretched, each one taut with the knowledge that soon everything would change. "Captain, they're closing in," Kane Varen reported, his fingers dancing over the heads-up display, the soft clicking of his gloves against the console punctuating the silence. "They've locked on. Weapons are hot." Valen's hand gripped the edge of his station, the cool steel under his fingers grounding him. "Don't fire unless I give the order," he said, his voice steady but edged with urgency. "We need them to believe they have control. Let them think they're winning." The air around them felt electric, each movement sharp and precise, a quiet storm building in anticipation. The screens flickered as the council ships advanced, their massive frames blocking out the stars like an encroaching nightmare. Every inch they moved closer felt like a drumbeat in Valen's chest, the thrum of his own heartbeat syncing with the approaching threat. He knew the weight of what he was about to do. The Sovereign's wrath wasn't just a ship, it was a statement, and the galaxy would remember that statement. "Enemy fleet is within firing range." Rukon Theron's voice was low, almost detached, but his eyes betrayed the tension he felt. The large alien's mandibles twitched in rapid succession, a sign of his growing frustration. He was used to hunting, to moving quickly, but this was different. "They're not firing," Valen muttered, barely audible. His eyes were still fixed on the plasma readouts, watching the enemy ships shift and move like a complex puzzle, waiting to snap into place. "They're too confident. Let them think we're vulnerable." "Ready on your command?" Varen responded, his fingers hovering over the activation sequence for the drones. The crew stood at the edge of their nerves, a collective breath held in the stillness. Suddenly, a flicker, a blip, a warning on the screen. Too late. A council warship fired. The blast came out of nowhere, lighting up the bridge with a flash that left afterimages burning into their retinas. The room jolted with the impact, the ship's frame shuddering, a violent reminder that the battle had begun. "Damn it!" Valen hissed, his hand slamming against the armrest. The crew jumped to their stations, moving with synchronized chaos. "Activate countermeasures, now!" "Deploying defensive drones!" Varen's voice rang out, cutting through the chaos. The drones shot into the void, their sleek forms gliding effortlessly through the darkness, energy shields sparking to life as they positioned themselves between the Sovereign's wrath and the incoming fire. The enemy's weapons hit the shields, but instead of overwhelming them, the energy was absorbed, redirected, and pushed back, a flashing cascade of light as the drones reconfigured their formations. "Those are new." Malik's voice suddenly crackled through the comms, cold and disbelieving. "Where did you get those weapons, human?" Valen's lips curled into a smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. "You're asking the wrong question, Commander. The real question is, why haven't we used them before?" "Keep them busy," Valen ordered. "Give them a reason to think we're still just a wreck of the past." The drones danced in the void, weaving between the Council's ships, flashing like fireflies in the dark. Valen watched their progress, calculating, waiting. The Council was overconfident. They had underestimated humanity before. But now, they would learn that underestimation could be fatal. Status on the enemy fleet? Valen's question was clipped, his attention focused on the battle unfolding before him. His crew had fallen into a rhythm, their movements sharp and decisive. It wasn't just a matter of survival. It was about exposing the truth, breaking the Council's stranglehold on the galaxy. Rukan's voice came through, steady but laced with a hint of respect. "They're losing their focus, Captain. They don't know how to respond to this. They're starting to spread out, trying to encircle us. They're not used to a ship like ours." Valen didn't take his eyes off the screens. The enemy ships were shifting, some breaking formation, some staying close. He knew it was coming. They would try to overwhelm them, force them into a corner. The Sovereign's Wrath had always been smaller, more agile, an advantage in a fight like this. "Activate the plasma disruptors," Valen ordered, his voice a quiet command, almost too calm in contrast to the chaos swirling outside. "Let's make them rethink their strategy." Varen's hands were already moving, his fingers tapping rapidly across the console. "Aye, Captain. Disruptors engaged, targeting their communication arrays." The Sovereign's Wrath hummed with energy as the disruptors fired, sending a pulse of energy toward the closest Council ship. The plasma pulse ripped through the space between them, striking the communications arrays of the enemy ship with surgical precision. For a moment, the battlefield went quiet, as if the universe had taken a breath. "Direct hit," Rukan reported, a satisfied growl in his tone. "Their comms are down. They're blind." Malik's response came almost instantly, a snarl in his voice. "You're playing with fire, Valen. We'll burn you for this." Valen's eyes locked onto the transmission, his expression unchanged. "You think you've burned us already, Malik, but you haven't. We're still here." The tension between the two sides was thick now, the lines drawn. Valen's mind was calculating the next move, his instincts sharp, honed from years of battle. The Council wasn't prepared for what was coming. They had expected a small, struggling remnant of humanity. What they didn't know was that humanity had been watching, learning, adapting. And now, it was time to prove just how wrong the Council had been. "Deploy all drones! Full tactical formation!" Valen ordered, his voice steady but carrying an edge. "We're not here to run. We're here to show them what humanity can do when it's pushed too far." The Sovereign's Wrath surged forward again, its drones moving like a swarm of calculated fury. The Council ships, disoriented and now scrambling to reorganize, didn't know what hit them. Laser fire erupted, but Valen had already anticipated their moves, guiding the drones with precision. The ships, once brimming with confidence, now found themselves outclassed, overwhelmed by an unexpected enemy that refused to fall. Malik's voice cut through again, this time raw, edged with something more than just military command. "This isn't over. You're nothing." Valen didn't flinch, didn't take his eyes off the battle. "We'll see about that." The battle raged, not with the brute force the Council had expected, but with something sharper, a promise, a warning. The Sovereign's Wrath moved like a shadow in the dark, its sleek hull gliding through the debris field left in the wake of the last exchange. The Council fleet had slowed, regrouping after the earlier chaos, but Valen knew it wasn't over. Their advantage had been tactical, but now the clock was ticking down. The Council might have been momentarily stunned, but they would regroup, adjust, and strike again. Valen's hand tightened on the edge of his console, his fingers still warm from the earlier tension. His mind was racing, every calculation a second behind the growing pressure around him. "We're running out of time, Captain." Kane Varen's voice cut through the silence, sharp, like a needle. "The Council is re-establishing their position. They'll come at us again, full force." Valen didn't look away from the laser plasma displays. Each pulse of data that flickered across the screen made his blood run colder. Their position was precarious. The Sovereign's Wrath was a marvel of human engineering, but against the overwhelming force of the Council, it was still a single ship with nothing to lose and everything to gain. "We need to make them see it," Valen murmured to himself, his eyes scanning the incoming transmissions. The truth about Earth's destruction, the truth about the Council's greed and its hidden war, needed to spread, needed to break the walls of secrecy they had built for centuries. The galaxy had been blind for too long, and now humanity was here to make them open their eyes. "Sergeant Theron, status on the data transmission?" Valen's voice was sharp as he turned to his communications officer. The alien's mandibles clicked with a sudden burst of tension. "It's ready, Captain. But the signal. Don't worry about the signal, Valen interrupted, his gaze steady and unyielding. Once we've launched the final phase, there's no turning back. The Council will see it all. They'll see what they've been hiding. A pulse of static crackled through the comms, but Valen didn't break his concentration. He had already committed. They would expose the Council's crimes, or they would die trying. Either way, humanity's legacy would be written in the stars. The Council ships were regrouping, their formation now more deliberate. The Sovereign's wrath had done its job, kept them at bay. But now came the real test. Valen's hand moved deliberately over the heads-up display in front of him. He pulled up the latest data, the energy readings, the trajectory analysis of the Council fleet. The pieces were falling into place. "We won't wait for them to make the first move this time," Valen said, his voice low but filled with intent. "Set course for their command ship. Full speed, and open a direct channel to Commander Malik." Rukan's gaze shifted as he worked, his fingers moving fluidly across the plasma display. "Captain, they've spread out their forces. We won't have time to reach the command ship before they're upon us." Valen's lips twisted into a small, knowing smile. "That's why we won't give them time." The ship's engines surged forward with a hiss, the vibrations moving through the floor beneath them. They were already on their way. But the Sovereign's wrath wasn't charging blindly into the fray. Valen had one last card to play, an unexpected twist in the battle that would throw the Council into disarray. Their strategy had been grounded in pure brute force, in intimidation, in their belief that no one could challenge their dominance. Valen knew better. Their arrogance would be their downfall. Kane Varen's voice broke through the tension, his fingers still dancing over the display. "Captain, we've engaged the drone network, but I'm warning you, the longer we delay, the more they'll adapt. We need to act fast." Valen's eyes flashed with understanding. "I know. Activate the final phase now." A soft beep echoed in the command center as Varen activated the sequence. The Sovereign's Wrath's drone network powered up, a fleet of small, agile machines designed not for attack, but for defense, for incapacitation. They weren't weapons in the traditional sense. They were the key to turning the tide. Each drone carried a piece of the quantum technology humanity had developed, technology the Council had desperately wanted to steal, but never could. And now the same technology would expose them for what they truly were. A tense silence filled the bridge. The crew, once frenetic with activity, now stood still, watching the unfolding plan. The drones were set to deploy, to surround and disrupt the enemy's communications, their weapon systems. It was the perfect distraction, one that would leave the Council vulnerable to the truth. The galaxy would finally see what had really happened to Earth. Valen stood at the center of it all, his gaze unwavering. "We're not here to destroy them. We're here to show the galaxy what they really are." The moment the drones launched, the bridge seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief. The vast dark outside swallowed the tiny machines as they sped toward their targets, their small forms undetectable to the Council's standard sensors. One by one, the ship's communications were scrambled, their tactical displays flaring into static. "Disruption complete," Varen said, his voice filled with quiet satisfaction. "They can't communicate, Captain. Their fleet is in disarray." Valen's eyes gleamed. "Now, the truth." He turned to Rukan. "Initiate the broadcast. Bring the hidden archives online. Let the galaxy see what the Council has tried so hard to bury." The alien's mandibles clicked rapidly in agreement. His fingers flew across the console, and soon a flashing image appeared on the laser plasma display, a vast archive of data. It was the same data they had recovered earlier, the same information that had led them to this point. The Council's betrayal of Earth was finally going to be made public. The lies that had kept them in power would be torn apart. Valen's voice was steady as he spoke. "This isn't just about us. It's about every species they've destroyed, every world they've subjugated in the name of control. They've wiped Earth off the map to hide their theft. But now, they can't run from the truth." The screen blinked, the data beginning to spread across the galaxy, accessible to any being with a receiver. The Council's crimes were now public knowledge. There would be no hiding, no more manipulation of the facts. A moment passed, and then the transmission from Commander Malik came through again, his voice tight with fury. "You think this changes anything, Valen? The Council's hold on this galaxy is unshakable." Valen's eyes burned with resolve. "Not anymore. The truth is unstoppable, Commander, and now it's your turn to face it." The battle had shifted. What had begun as a physical confrontation was now a war of information, of ideas, of exposing the Council's lies. The galaxy would no longer be fooled by their facade. The truth was spreading, and nothing could stop it now. Valen stood tall, his resolve unshaken, his crew at his back. The battle had shifted, and now the Sovereign's wrath was gliding smoothly through the void, its weapons stilled, and its drones hovering in a defensive formation. The truth had been broadcasted to every corner of the galaxy, its message reverberating through every communications channel. The Council's stranglehold was slipping. They had been exposed for what they truly were: tyrants, thieves, manipulators, and no amount of military might could protect them now. Valen stood at the bridge, the dim glow from the laser plasma displays casting sharp shadows across his face. His jaw was tight, his eyes focused, but there was something in his gaze, something calm, almost serene. It was as though he had been preparing for this moment his entire life, and now, standing at the precipice of humanity's resurgence, he felt it, the weight of 1,000 years of silence, broken. "I don't think they're coming back from this," Kane Varen said, his voice low, almost in awe as he worked the controls. His fingers flicked across the heads-up display, bringing up the remnants of the Council's fleet, now disorganized, fractured. "They won't," Valen replied, his tone steady. But underneath, there was an undercurrent of something else. Satisfaction. Relief. "They couldn't. Not after everything they've done." There was a pause on the bridge. The crew, still in their stations, could feel it too, the weight of the moment settling in. They had fought, they had bled, and they had exposed the truth. Now the consequences were unfolding. The transmission from Commander Malik finally came through again, but this time it wasn't filled with the venom it once had. Instead, there was a weary resignation in his voice, something that hinted at a man who had finally begun to see the truth for what it was. "You were right," Malik's voice crackled through the comms, quiet and defeated. "The Council lied, and it cost us everything." Valen's hands curled into fists, not out of anger, but something else. Not triumph, not vengeance, but justice, the kind that had been denied for too long. He spoke, but his voice was softer than it had ever been during the battle. "The truth isn't something you can bury, Commander. It's not a weapon. It's not a tool. It's just the truth, and it's always been more powerful than anything the Council could throw at us." A soft click came through the comms, and Valen could feel the change in the atmosphere. It wasn't the tension of war anymore. The Council's last act of defiance, its retreat, had broken them. Now they were just trying to hold on to whatever little power they had left. "Tell your people," Malik continued, his voice sounding distant. "Tell them we failed. But there's still a chance. There's still a chance for peace, if you're willing to give it a try." Valen's eyes flickered to the view screen, where the stars lay in a vast, scattered web, stretching out before them. The Sovereign's wrath was drifting toward Verdi Prime now, its mission complete. The galaxy was already beginning to change, the whispers of revolt spreading like wildfire in the void. But Malik's words lingered with him, and something inside Valen stirred. The galaxy had been shattered by greed, by fear, by war. But now it was ready for something different. "We'll give it a try," Valen said, a soft smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "But first we need to make sure everyone knows what happened. No more secrets. No more lies." He turned away from the comms screen, his voice growing louder now, filling the bridge with the certainty that had been building within him for days. "We didn't come back to destroy the Council," he continued, his eyes now meeting those of his crew. "We didn't come back for revenge. We came back to show them that humanity isn't about weapons. It's about choices. It's about changing the way things are done. We have the power to build, to protect, to create, not just for us, but for everyone. Rukan's mandibles clicked with a mix of respect and curiosity. And what do we do now, Captain? Now that the truth is out? Valen glanced toward the planet below, Verde Prime's surface lit by the glow of distant suns. The people there, and on countless other worlds, were waking up to the reality that had been hidden for so long. This wasn't just a victory for humanity. It was a victory for all the galaxies, for every world that had suffered at the hands of a corrupt empire. We rebuild, Valen said firmly. We help them rebuild. No more war, no more destruction. We show the galaxy what it means to move forward, together. There was a long silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that followed a turning point, where everything was possible. The Sovereign's wrath now felt more like a symbol than a weapon. Humanity's true strength was no longer in their ability to fight, but in their ability to choose peace, to choose the truth. As the ship descended toward Verde Prime's atmosphere, the crew gathered around, their eyes turned outward toward the future. The distant fire of the planet's cities burned brightly beneath them, but Valen knew this time it wasn't the fire of war. It was the fire of something new, something bigger. Captain, Rukan spoke again, his voice low, almost reverent. We didn't just win a battle, we won the right to shape the future. Valen nodded, his gaze drifting across the bridge, meeting the eyes of each crew member. Yes, Sergeant, we did. And now we lead the way. The words weren't boastful. They weren't arrogant. They were the quiet recognition of a truth that had been earned through sweat, blood, and sacrifice. The battle had been won, but it wasn't the end of their story. It was the beginning of something greater. As the Sovereign's wrath touched down on Verde Prime's surface, the sound of its landing gear locking into place reverberated through the ship, a soft thud that echoed the finality of their mission. The crew moved swiftly, ready for whatever came next. They had fought for the truth, and now they would fight for the future. And somewhere, in the distance, the galaxy began to change. Not with weapons, not with violence, but with the undeniable force of humanity's will to forge a new path. A path not dictated by fear or conquest, but by understanding and collaboration. This was the beginning of humanity's return, and the galaxy would never be the same again.